When people ask me about my childhood, I usually smile politely and change the subject. It's easier than explaining what it means to grow up in the shadow of someone who shines brighter in the eyes of everyone around you. I was 8 years old when our parents died in a car accident. One moment, we were a family of four, driving home from my school recital, and the next, I was holding Claire's hand in a hospital waiting room while strangers explained words like collision and fatal. That was the night my life split in two, before and after. We went to live with our uncle and aunt, who had no children of their own. At first, I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. I told myself that even if life was unfair, at least Claire and I would stick together. But I quickly learned that in their home, love wasn't divided equally. Claire was 6 at the time, small, pretty, with golden curls and big doe eyes. She cried delicately, like something out of a movie, and everyone rushed to comfort her. I was quieter, more awkward, too serious for my age. I didn't know how to cry in a way that made people want to help me. If I cried, I was told to be strong for your sister. If Claire cried, she was scooped into arms and showered with affection. That set the tone for the next 10 years. Birthdays? Claire got parties with balloons, gifts, and family friends gathered to sing. Mine? A store-bought cake after dinner, maybe a card. Christmas? Claire got the doll she'd been dreaming of for months. I got socks, or sometimes nothing at all. Even schoolwork became a cruel measuring stick. If Claire got a B, my aunt would beam proudly and say, "You're such a smart girl." If I brought home an A, they'd ask why it wasn't an A+. Don't be smug, my uncle once warned me when I mentioned being at the top of my class. Nobody likes a show-off. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped expecting kindness. The part that hurt most wasn't the favoritism itself, but the way it shaped Claire. She learned quickly that she could get away with anything. If she broke a vase, I was blamed for not watching her. If she lied about finishing her homework, I was lectured for being a bad influence. Claire didn't even need to deny it. She would just widen her eyes and they'd take her side. And yet, I loved her. She was still my little sister. At night, when the house was quiet, she would sneak into my room and whisper that she missed Mom and Dad. We'd cry together under the blankets. In those moments, it was just us against the world. But as the years passed, even that bond began to fray. Claire grew into her role as the golden child, basking in the constant praise and protection. And I grew into mine, the scapegoat, the background character in my own life. By the time I was 15, I felt invisible in that house. I could disappear for hours and no one would notice. But inside me, something else was growing, a quiet, burning determination. If no one was going to fight for me, then I'd fight for myself. I didn't know it yet, but that determination would be the first spark of freedom. At 15, I realized that if I wanted a future, it wouldn't be handed to me. Nobody was going to pat me on the back, tell me I was capable, or support my dreams. The only way out of that house, out of invisibility, was through my own effort. I started spending every waking moment on my studies. While Claire watched TV or hung out with her friends, I sat at the kitchen table, scribbling essays and memorizing equations. If our uncle noticed, he'd grunt, "Don't strain yourself, kid. Life isn't about books." But I knew better. Education was my only lifeline. One night, I overheard my aunt bragging to a neighbor about how Claire is the gifted one in our family. She'll do something special one day. I remember standing there, clutching a stack of textbooks, and feeling like I'd been erased, like my existence was a blank page no one wanted to read. That was when I promised myself, I will not be invisible forever. The first crack in their narrative came at 16. I entered a statewide essay competition in secret. I didn't tell anyone because I knew they'd dismiss it, or worse, sabotage it. I poured my entire soul into that essay, nights of research, endless drafts, raw honesty about grief, resilience, and the quiet strength of being overlooked. When the results came in, I nearly fainted. I had won first place, a scholarship award and prize money that to me felt like a golden ticket. I remember holding that letter in my hands, shaking, barely able to breathe. For once, I had proof, undeniable proof, that I was worth something. I had achieved something no one could take away. But when I showed my aunt and uncle, their reactions crushed me back down. My aunt skimmed the letter, handed it back, and said, "That's nice, but don't get a big head." My uncle muttered, "Well, I hope you don't expect us to pay for you to run off to some fancy school. You'll just end up broke and miserable." And Claire? She rolled her eyes and laughed. "Why would anyone read your boring essay? You probably just got lucky." For a moment, I wanted to scream, to tear the letter into pieces, to demand they see me. But then, something inside me shifted. Instead of rage, I felt a cold clarity. They will never see me. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I work, they've already decided who I am. And that means I don't need their approval anymore. So, I hid the prize money in a savings account. I started applying for every scholarship I could find, pouring hours into applications, essays, and recommendation letters. My teachers, at least, noticed my potential. A few even pulled me aside and said, "You're going to do great things. Don't let anyone hold you back." Those words, so simple, so ordinary, became fuel for me. By senior year, I had a small but growing pile of scholarship offers. I also landed a part-time job at a bookstore, where for the first time, people treated me like, well, a person. Customers smiled at me, coworkers asked about my day, and no one compared me to my sister. The day my acceptance letter arrived from a respected university with nearly a full ride, I sat on my bed and cried. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. Relief that I finally had a way out. When I told my aunt and uncle, they barely reacted. My uncle only said, "Don't expect us to send you money if you get in over your head." My aunt sighed and asked, "But who's going to watch Claire if you're gone?" Claire smirked and shrugged, as if the idea of me leaving was irrelevant. That was the night I packed a small suitcase and placed it under my bed, ready for the day I could walk out. And when that day finally came, when I boarded the bus to my new life, not one person in that house came to wave goodbye. But I didn't care. For the first time since I was 8 years old, I felt free. I was scared, yes. Alone? Absolutely. But as the bus pulled away, I pressed my forehead to the glass and whispered to myself, "This is the beginning. No one can erase me now." College was like stepping into sunlight after years of living underground. Nobody there knew me as the forgotten niece or Claire's older sister. I was just me, a freshman with scholarships, ambition, and a hunger to finally build something that belonged only to me. At first, it was overwhelming. I'd never been around so many confident, outspoken people. My roommate came from a wealthy family, the kind who never worried about tuition or bills. I felt like an imposter. But slowly, my determination became my anchor. I spent nights buried in law textbooks, worked part-time jobs, and forced myself to speak up in class, even when my voice shook. And people noticed. Professors encouraged me. Friends admired my work ethic. For the first time, I wasn't the shadow. I was someone with a future. It was during my second year that I met Michael. He was charming in a quiet, steady way, nothing like the arrogant guys that dominated campus. He'd bring me coffee during study sessions, walk me home late at night, and actually listen when I spoke. No one had ever looked at me like that before, like I mattered. At first, I resisted. I told myself love was a distraction, that it was safer to keep my guard up. But Michael was patient. He never rushed me, never made me feel like I had to earn his affection. Eventually, I let myself believe him, and for the first time, I felt what it was like to be chosen. After graduation, things moved quickly. I got an associate position at a law firm, grueling hours, impossible expectations, but exactly what I had dreamed of. Michael and I married in a small ceremony. Nothing extravagant, but it felt perfect. We bought a modest house, the kind with creaky floors and sunlight in the mornings. I decorated it with bookshelves and secondhand furniture, and every time I turned the key in the lock, I felt a rush of pride. This was mine, ours. Meanwhile, Claire drifted. She started college but dropped out within a year. She bounced between jobs, sometimes living with our aunt and uncle, sometimes with boyfriends who never lasted. I tried to be supportive, even when resentment bubbled under my skin. Michael would tell me, "Don't be too hard on her. Not everyone figures life out as quickly as you." And I wanted to believe he was right. For a while, I lived in an illusion of balance. Work was exhausting but rewarding. Michael and I talked about starting a family someday. Claire would visit sometimes, complaining about her latest breakup or financial problem, and I'd bite my tongue, reminding myself that I was stronger now. I had built something real. It felt like I had finally escaped the shadows of my childhood, like I had carved out a place in the world where I belonged. But what I didn't realize was that shadows have a way of following you, and mine was about to come crashing back in the most devastating way. The first signs were so small I almost ignored them. Michael working late, his phone lighting up with messages he never explained. The way he'd turn it face down on the table when I walked into the room. At first, I told myself it was just stress. Everyone warned me that marriage after law school was hard. But then there were the excuses: team dinners, urgent deadlines, just grabbing a drink with colleagues. He'd come home smelling of cologne, not the cheap one he usually wore, but something new, expensive. I noticed, but I didn't want to believe what my gut was already screaming. The truth came to me by accident. One night, Michael fell asleep on the couch, his phone buzzing endlessly. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity won. I picked it up and froze. A message from Claire. Words that no sister should ever read. Intimate, familiar, like a punch to the stomach. I scrolled, hands trembling, and each line confirmed what I feared. They weren't just talking. They had been together. For months. When I confronted Michael, he went pale, then defensive. He swore it was just a mistake, that he still loved me. But when I turned to Claire, hoping for denial, for her to say it wasn't true, she just stared back with that same doe-eyed innocence she'd used our whole lives. Except this time, there was no innocence left. Then came the final blow. Claire was pregnant. I felt my entire world collapse. The house I'd built, the marriage I'd cherished, the fragile sense of stability I had fought so hard for, all shattered in an instant. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my safe place, had betrayed me with the one person who should have been untouchable. My own sister. I wanted to scream, to tear everything apart, but instead, I went cold, numb. I remember standing there, watching them, thinking, of course it's her. She's always taken everything without consequence. Why would this be any different? Michael begged me not to tell anyone. He said it would ruin his reputation, his career. Claire cried, saying she didn't mean for it to happen, as if pregnancies just fell out of the sky. They both looked at me, waiting for me to crumble, to forgive, to make their guilt easier to bear. But something inside me snapped. The quiet, obedient child who accepted favoritism, the invisible girl who swallowed every injustice, she was gone. I didn't shout, I didn't break down, I simply said, everyone is going to know the truth. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in Claire's eyes. The next few weeks felt like walking through fire, but I kept walking. I filed for divorce immediately. My firm's senior partners, usually stone-faced and strict, surprised me with their support. They told me to take the time I needed, reassured me that my work spoke for itself. In a world where reputation meant everything, Michael suddenly realized he had more to lose than I did. But I wasn't content with ending it quietly. For once, I wanted the truth dragged into the light. At our next family gathering, my aunt's birthday, I showed up uninvited. Everyone was there: my aunt, uncle, distant cousins, even family friends who'd known us since childhood. Claire was seated next to my aunt, glowing, her hands protectively over her stomach. Michael sat stiffly at her side, as though trying to play the role of dutiful partner. I waited until the room was buzzing with small talk, laughter, clinking glasses. Then I stood. "I have something to say," I announced, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Silence fell. Every face turned to me, some curious, some wary. Claire's smile faltered. "I'm filing for divorce," I said. Because my husband has been having an affair with my sister, and she's pregnant with his child. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone dropped a fork. My aunt's face drained of color, while my uncle muttered something under his breath. Claire froze, wide-eyed, her lips parting but no words coming out. Michael reached for her hand, but it only made the betrayal clearer. For years, I had been the quiet one, the background character in this family. But in that moment, the spotlight was mine, and I turned it on them. Whispers exploded around the table. A cousin muttered, "Unbelievable." An older relative shook his head and said, "Shameful." Even those who had always defended Claire looked at her differently, as though they were seeing her for the first time without the golden glow of favoritism. My aunt tried to regain control. "Families go through things. We don't air dirty laundry." "No," I cut her off, sharper than I'd ever dared before. "For years, you've excused her behavior. You made me invisible so she could shine. But this isn't a mistake. This is betrayal." The room was electric with tension. Claire finally burst into tears, but for once, no one rushed to comfort her. The pedestal she'd lived on all her life had crumbled beneath her feet. After that night, everything shifted. Friends distanced themselves from her. Our relatives, once her biggest cheerleaders, stopped inviting her to gatherings. Even our aunt and uncle, though they tried to defend her at first, grew weary of the whispers, the judgment. The financial help they'd always given her dried up. Michael fared no better. Word spread through the legal community faster than I expected. Colleagues respected me for handling it with dignity, but his reputation tarnished. Clients didn't want a lawyer who couldn't manage his own household, let alone theirs. And me? For the first time, I felt vindicated. Not happy, not healed, but vindicated. The truth was out. The golden child had fallen. Yet beneath that satisfaction was something darker, an emptiness I hadn't anticipated. Exposing them didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't bring back my marriage. It didn't give me the family I'd lost decades ago. It just left me standing in the wreckage, free but alone. It has been months since that night, months since the truth detonated and reduced my family to ashes. Claire now lives in a small apartment across town. She's heavily pregnant, struggling to pay rent, working shifts at a diner to keep the lights on. Michael didn't last. He stuck around for a while, but the fantasy collapsed when the reality of fatherhood set in. Now he's gone, leaving her to face the consequences alone. She calls me almost every day. Sometimes she cries, sometimes she begs, sometimes she just sits in silence, hoping I'll say something to bridge the gap. Her voice is raw, unpolished, so different from the confident, adored sister who once had everything handed to her. "I know I don't deserve it," she says, "but please, don't let me do this alone." My aunt and uncle have grown colder toward her too. Not because they suddenly see me, but because Claire's fall from grace embarrassed them. They don't help her the way they used to. The safety net is gone. And now she turns to me, the sister she betrayed, the one she pushed into the shadows her whole life. Sometimes I imagine myself showing up at her door with groceries, helping her through the birth, giving that baby the stability I never had. Part of me aches for that child, innocent, caught in the crossfire of choices they never made. But another part of me burns with anger. I think of the nights I cried alone in my room while Claire was being praised. I think of the moment I read those messages, realizing my husband had chosen her. I think of the humiliation, the years of invisibility, the way my life was ripped apart. Why should I rescue her now? Why should I always be the one to clean up the mess? Friends tell me to cut ties completely, to let her live with the consequences. My therapist says forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, that I can choose compassion without putting myself back into the role of caretaker. But late at night, when I lie awake, the dilemma twists in my chest. Do I let her drown, or do I reach out my hand one last time? Because here's the truth. I don't miss Claire. I don't miss Michael. I don't even miss the idea of family I once clung to. What I miss is the version of myself that believed in loyalty, in bonds that couldn't be broken. Now I know better. The choice before me isn't just about Claire, it's about who I want to be. Do I stay hardened, protecting myself at all costs? Or do I risk opening the door again, knowing it could lead to more pain? I haven't decided yet. But every time the phone rings and I see her name on the screen, my heart pounds with the same question. Am I strong enough to forgive the unforgivable, or strong enough to finally walk away forever?